The First World War, a global conflict of unprecedented scale, erupted in the summer of 1914. It was a war that would change the course of history, leaving an indelible mark on the world. The seeds of this conflict had been sown over many years, with rising tensions and a complex web of alliances setting the stage for a catastrophic confrontation. Europe, divided into two powerful alliances, found itself on the brink of destruction. The continent was a powder keg, with nationalistic fervor and imperial ambitions fueling the fire. The intricate network of alliances meant that any conflict had the potential to escalate rapidly, drawing multiple nations into the fray. On one side stood the Central Powers, led by Germany and Austria-Hungary. These nations were bound together by mutual interests, and a desire to assert their dominance on the European stage. Germany, under the leadership of Kaiser Wilhelm II, sought to challenge the established powers and expand its influence. Austria-Hungary, a multi-ethnic empire, was grappling with internal strife and external threats. On the other side stood the Allied powers, spearheaded by Great Britain, France and Russia. These countries were united by a common goal: to counter the ambitions of the Central Powers and maintain the balance of power in Europe. Great Britain, with its vast empire, was determined to protect its interests. France, still reeling from its defeat in the Franco-Prussian War, sought to regain its lost glory. Russia, a sprawling empire, was eager to assert its influence in the Balkans. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary ignited the powder keg of European tensions. On June 28, 1914, in the city of Sarajevo, a Bosnian Serb nationalist named Gavrilo Princip fired the shots that would plunge the world into war. The assassination set off a chain reaction, with Austria-Hungary declaring war on Serbia, and the web of alliances pulling other nations into the conflict. A complex web of alliances and treaties quickly drew the continent into a devastating war. The Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance, along with various other agreements, meant that countries were bound to come to each other's aid. What began as a regional conflict soon escalated into a full-scale war, with nations mobilizing their armies and preparing for battle. The world watched in horror as the conflict escalated. Newspapers around the globe carried headlines of war declarations and mobilizations. Crowds gathered in city squares anxiously reading the latest news. The initial excitement and patriotic fervor soon gave way to the grim reality of a prolonged and brutal conflict. Modern warfare introduced new technologies and tactics. The industrial age had brought about significant advancements in weaponry and military strategy. The battlefield was transformed, with the introduction of machine guns, tanks, and airplanes. These innovations made the war more deadly and destructive than any previous conflict. Machine guns, tanks, and poison gas became grim symbols of the war's brutality. The machine gun, capable of firing hundreds of rounds per minute, mowed down soldiers in droves. Tanks, though still in their infancy, provided a new means of breaking through enemy lines. Poison gas, a horrifying weapon, caused agonizing deaths and long-term suffering for those who survived. And poison gas became grim symbols of the war's brutality. The use of chemical weapons marked a new low in the history of warfare, with soldiers donning gas masks to protect themselves from the deadly fumes. The psychological impact of gas attacks was profound, instilling fear and dread in the hearts of those on the front lines. Millions of soldiers perished in the trenches of Europe. The Western Front, stretching from the North Sea to the Swiss border, became a vast network of trenches and fortifications. Life in the trenches was a living nightmare, with soldiers enduring constant shelling, disease, and the ever-present threat of death. The war of attrition took a heavy toll, with entire generations of young men lost to the carnage. Civilians, too, were caught in the crossfire, facing hardship and loss on an unprecedented scale. Cities were bombarded, homes destroyed, and families torn apart. Refugees fled the advancing army, seeking safety wherever they could find it. The war's impact was felt far beyond the battlefield, as economies were strained and societies were forever changed by the trauma of conflict. The United States, geographically removed from the conflict, initially adopted a policy of neutrality. President Woodrow Wilson, advocating for peace and diplomacy, sought to keep America out of the European war. Public opinion within the United States was divided. Many Americans with strong ties to their European homelands sympathized with one side or the other. Others, however, believed that America should avoid entanglement in foreign conflicts. The United States, with its growing industrial might, became a crucial supplier of goods to both sides of the war. This neutrality, however, would be tested as the war raged on. German U-boats engaging in unrestricted submarine warfare posed a growing threat to American ships and citizens. The sinking of the Lusitania in 1915 proved to be a pivotal moment in America's journey towards war. This tragic event marked a significant shift in the global landscape and had far-reaching consequences that would eventually draw the United States into the First World War. The British ocean liner, carrying American passengers, was torpedoed by a German submarine off the coast of Ireland. The Lusitania was a symbol of luxury and safety, and its destruction sent shockwaves through the international community. The attack was a stark reminder of the dangers lurking beneath the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. The attack resulted in the deaths of over 1,000 people, including 128 Americans. The loss of so many innocent lives was a devastating blow and highlighted the brutal reality of modern warfare. Families were torn apart, and the world mourned the senseless loss of life. The sinking of the Lusitania sparked outrage and condemnation in the United States. Newspapers across the country featured headlines that screamed of the atrocity, and the public was gripped by a sense of anger and injustice. The event became a rallying cry for those who believed that America could no longer remain neutral in the face of such aggression. Public opinion, once divided on the issue of war, began to shift. The debate over whether to join the conflict had been ongoing, but the sinking of the Lusitania brought a new urgency to the conversation. People from all walks of life began to voice their opinions, and the nation found itself at a crossroads. The incident fueled anti-German sentiment and strengthened the call for American intervention. Propaganda posters and speeches painted Germany as a ruthless enemy, and rallies were held to demand action. The pressure on the government to respond grew with each passing day. President Wilson, while condemning the attack, continued to pursue diplomatic solutions. He was determined to find a way to resolve the conflict without resorting to war. Wilson's leadership during this time was marked by a delicate balance between maintaining peace and preparing for the possibility of entering the fray. He demanded an end to unrestricted submarine warfare, hoping to avoid a direct confrontation with Germany. Diplomatic negotiations were intense and the stakes were incredibly high. Wilson's efforts were aimed at protecting American lives and interests while trying to uphold the principles of international law and human decency. Despite his best efforts, the situation continued to escalate. The United States began to prepare for the possibility of war, with military training and buildup becoming more pronounced. The nation was on the brink of a significant transformation, and the events set in motion by the sinking of the Lusitania would ultimately lead to America's entry into World War I. In April 1917, the United States declared war on Germany, marking a turning point in the conflict. American soldiers departed for Europe, ready to join the fight and make their mark on history. The legacy of the Lusitania lived on, serving as a powerful reminder of the cost of war and the importance of standing up against tyranny. In early 1917, another event further propelled the United States towards war. The world was already in turmoil, and tensions were high. The United States, though maintaining a stance of neutrality, was being drawn closer to the conflict with each passing day. The Zimmermann telegram, a secret diplomatic communication intercepted by British intelligence, revealed a German plot to entice Mexico into an alliance against the United States. This telegram was a game-changer. It was a bold move by Germany, aiming to open a new front against the United States by promising Mexico the return of territories it had lost decades earlier. The telegram proposed that Mexico would reclaim territories lost in the Mexican-American War if it joined the Central Powers. These territories included Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. The very idea of such a proposal was enough to stir the American public and government alike. It was a direct threat to the nation's sovereignty and security. The Zimmermann telegram, published in American newspapers, sent shockwaves through the nation. The American public, already wary of the ongoing war in Europe, was now faced with the possibility of conflict on their own soil. The newspapers of the time were filled with headlines and articles dissecting the implications of the telegram. Public opinion, already inflamed by the sinking of the Lusitania, now overwhelmingly favored war. The Lusitania, a British ocean liner, had been sunk by a German U-boat in 1915, resulting in the loss of 1,198 lives, including 128 Americans. This act had already turned many Americans against Germany, and the Zimmermann telegram only added fuel to the fire. The telegram confirmed American fears of German aggression and expansionism. It was seen as proof that Germany would stop at nothing to achieve its goals, even if it meant dragging other nations into the conflict. Anti-German sentiment in the United States reached new heights, with many calling for immediate action. It provided the final push for the United States to abandon its neutrality and enter the war on the side of the Allies. The government, led by President Woodrow Wilson, could no longer ignore the mounting evidence and public outcry. On April 6, 1917, the United States officially declared war on Germany, marking its entry into World War I. This decision would change the course of the war and the future of the world. In April 1917, President Woodrow Wilson, citing Germany's continued submarine warfare and the Zimmermann telegram, asked Congress for a declaration of war. The United States, he argued, had a moral obligation to defend democracy and freedom against German aggression. Congress, reflecting the sentiment of the nation, overwhelmingly voted in favor of war. The United States, with its vast resources and manpower, joined the Allied powers in the fight against Germany. The declaration of war, however, was specifically directed at Germany. The Ottoman Empire, although allied with Germany, was not included in the declaration. The Ottoman Empire, a vast and declining power, presented a different set of challenges for the United States. Unlike Germany, the Ottoman Empire was geographically distant and posed no direct threat to American soil. The Ottomans, moreover, had not engaged in actions that directly threatened American interests or citizens. The United States, while acknowledging the Ottoman Empire as an enemy of its allies, saw no strategic imperative to declare war. American policymakers understood that a declaration of war against the Ottoman Empire would complicate an already complex situation.